So thank you all for being here and welcoming us, and to Christy and Sally and the entire Ellevate Ellevest family for making room for this important conversation with my new absolutely favorite CEO, Margaret Keane.
Oh, thank you so much.
I want to start with what's happening in the world and then get into a little bit more the nuts and bolts of how you've turned Synchrony into really a welcoming and inclusive place, because there's a lot of courage in what you've done, and I want to make sure we get into it. But we're living in interesting times, to say the least. We've got migrants at the border and violence and hate speech in the streets. And while I would very much love you to solve all these problems, I know that you can't. But you do weigh in, and I was curious, and some of my readers were curious too. How do you weigh in? How do you choose your battles?
Yeah, I think it's important to really think through as a public CEO, what can you really control, and how do you really change the dynamics of what's happening externally. So as you said, I can't change the world, but what I can change is how we treat employees inside our company, how we think about what they're going through in terms of when they walk out of their house, come into our office, what's on their mind. And I think one thing we work towards is trying to have open dialogue and talk about, a word that I think is missing a lot is kindness. And what I really try to strive inside the company is to create a company that is diverse, and I love the word inclusive, because what I want people to feel when they come to my company is they can be their authentic self, no matter who they are, what they believe in, what color they are, it doesn't matter, that they feel like once they walk through the doors of Synchrony, that they have every opportunity in the world to grow, be successful, and really contribute to the company. And we've worked really hard to create that culture inside the company, and it's something that we continue to work on every single day.
But it's hard. These candid conversations are hard. Maybe you could tell us the story of Charlotte and just some of the early conversations.
Sure. So I think, Charlotte had a couple of things going on, one around something that the state legislator was trying to do in terms of, the LGBT community. We actually have a big site there. So we took a stance and did write a letter, and, obviously that did work out in a good way. I think the other area was there was a shooting down in Charlotte. There were some riots down there, and, I took the time to actually go down to the site. We have about 750 people there, and just had an open forum discussion on what was on people's minds. And, the number one issue people felt at that time was just pure safety. And we talked a lot about what we needed to do inside our own community of Synchrony to make sure that people were feeling safe and having that open dialogue about what was on people's minds. And, it sounds simple, a very simple dialogue, but it makes people feel, one, that we recognize and respect what they were feeling challenged by. And I think that openness of having that open dialogue and really understanding the respect and, another word, empathy for what people are dealing with. And I think as CEOs, we can't just assume that what's happening in the outside world doesn't work its way into the office. And so just being conscious of that, I think, is really, and having that dialogue is always helpful.
So it's been, 4 years now since Synchrony spun out from GE Capital. Tell us about your inclusion journey. What are some of the things that you instituted?
Sure.
And what were some of the challenges? GE is an established brand.
Yeah, so I'll start with the second one first. I think probably the biggest thing we had to think about was the brand itself. Obviously, we were coming out of an iconic brand. Most of the people who worked in our company had worked there for many, many years. Many people wanted to retire out of GE. And so we spent a lot of time just going around and really understanding what was on the employees' minds and really listening to some of their concerns about this transformation. My HR leader and I did numerous town halls, and we were able to take a lot of that feedback and kind of think through, okay, what do we want to be as a company? And one of the things we did is we did the IPO in July of 2014. In September, I pulled my whole leadership team together and talked about, okay, we need to get together and talk about our values. And honestly, my team was, really, Margaret, we have so much to do. Like, we're going to take 3 days to work on this. I'm like, yes, we are. Yes. And it turned out to, I think, be really a foundational element of how we created the culture of Synchrony, because those values were done by this leadership team, but they're vetted all the way through the company. And I think, they really describe who we are. I think the second thing that we really worked on was this whole concept of diversity and inclusion. One of the good things of GE, they had a lot of diversity networks. I think we made a couple of different twists. One twist is we invited the whole company to be part of the network. It wasn't just exempt employees, but we invited every hourly employees to be part of our networks. That was a big change. So I think that was different. I think the other is we added additional networks. So we have, for instance, one of the networks we added is people with disabilities. We now have over 100 people in the U.S. who are people with disabilities working at Synchrony, and it's one of the networks I'm particularly proud of because it really changes people's lives when you can give people a really good job and something to wake up to every single morning. So I think that was a big change. And then the other thing we did is we have this symposium each year where we bring over 500 diverse employees together, and we spend 2.5 days with our board, by the way,
That's incredible to me.
really engaging on diversity and inclusion from all different angles.
And what have you learned in the last couple of years with these symposiums? What kind of impact has it had?
We learn something every year. We walk away every year with something new, and I think I was talking to you a little bit earlier. One of the things that came up was for our non-exempt employees, they wanted to know how do they grow, how do they develop, and out of that we created a program called STEP, which is a training program for 2 years where we take non-exempt employees, put them through a program, develop them. By the way, many of these individuals are diverse.
Well, yeah.
Many diverse, and then they end up becoming leaders and managers of our company. And about 70 to 75% get promoted after they finish the program. So it's been a big success. We've been really able to change the face of our leaders by really investing in them and taking a chance on people who, come to work every day to do a really good job, right?
I hadn't really considered before. I want to ask a question about the talent pipeline, because that is the thing that everybody says, that the talent pipeline for women, particularly in finance and certain industries, and for people of color and for women of color particularly, is very, very thin. But the fact that you're actually looking at your hourly wage workers, who are the heart and soul of your customer contact as potential for leaders, is a really important development.
And they're also the face of our customers. So if you think about, we're dealing with companies across America. The face of our employees is the face of the people who come and use our cards. So the more we can represent that in the leadership of our company, I'm believing, and a lot of statistics show this, that the company will be more successful because of it.
So what's it like being a woman who's CEO of a financial institution, surrounded by big financial institutions that are all run by some version of the same guy, and I think that's a lot of fun.
Actually, the only difference is the color of the tie. The tie changes.
Networking among your peers, I get to talk to individual CEOs when I have conversations like this, when I do a story, but I don't get to see you interact together. Are they welcoming and opening and open? And it's also investors and shareholders. I mean, you're part of an ecosystem that's very specific.
Yeah, I will tell you that, I've worked my way up, obviously, so it's not the first time.
From the call center.
From a call center, but it's not the first time I've been around or sitting at the table where I was the only woman. I think what's been a little more stark is it's not just about the lack of women, it's really the lack of diversity at the top. It's really stark. I've been in a number of situations where I literally was the only diverse person in a room of 50 or 60 people. And it seems strange after my whole career that I feel like I'm back there again.
Yeah.
So I think for me personally, it's something that I pay attention to. I know that people are looking at me. I know people are looking for role models. I believe that I've made this and I'm successful. So my job is to really figure out how do I help other people who are diverse be successful. And I pay a lot of attention. I pay attention, just something as simple we were talking earlier, when I go to investor days or we have investors come in, there's a handful of women, just a handful. And I try to do that extra little thing of just going out of my way to make sure I recognize it. I'll make comments like, oh, I'm glad you brought the women along, so I will just, purposely speak about this because I think, it's important that we demonstrate as leaders that we have to change the face of who we're interacting with across the table.
So what's your advice for someone who may be farther down the food chain, maybe in their first leadership job or early on in their career, who doesn't have a CEO or a board that's as interested as you are? Can you change the culture from the middle?
You know, I think that's one that we're working on. I have to say, we've done a very good job. Last year, 60% of the people we promoted into more of our senior ranks were diverse people. So that's a really good statistic. A lot of them were women, and a lot of them were diverse women. So I feel really good about that. But we still are challenged on how do we get people in the middle to feel confident enough that they can go for the big job. And we've been doing some very specific leadership development for women in the middle. You know, I'd say one of the things that is still somewhat disappointing to me, I still think women have this little voice in their head where they don't think they qualify or are capable of going for the job. And I think we have to make sure as leaders, no matter where we are, that we're pulling them forward, giving them that opportunity, making sure HR is engaged in the conversation. And, you know, as CEOs, and as leaders across, you know, my senior leadership team, it's on us to understand who is the talent. So I think I was saying to you earlier, I do a lot of roundtables. I go around, I meet, and I write names down just based on my interaction, and I'll say, you know, this person looks like they're a real talent. What are we doing? How, you know, do we have them in a development class? What are we working on? How are we helping them? And having very real conversations about people's development at all levels of the organization. Because the only way you create a pipeline is you have to start all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. And I think one thing that I was lucky enough to be able to do was create my board from scratch. And so I have a very diverse board, and I leverage that diversity of the board.
Yeah.
I engage with them, with our employees. They will be at our symposium, our board. They're going to do a panel for us. They go to the dinners that we have. And I think, you know, here you have some very successful, diverse leaders that anyone in my organization can look up to and say, wow, there's someone who looks like me sitting up on that stage. And I think we got to work that all the way through the company.
So you mentioned bringing your whole self to work and also having a lack of confidence, perhaps, for women. And yet we are in an unprecedented time where women hopefully can start to feel more safe in the world. We've got Me Too and Time's Up. I never thought I would see a man like Harvey Weinstein in handcuffs. This has been a dramatic change.
It was a nice picture, though.
It was, it was encouraging. I was wondering if you thought this moment was real, and is it sustainable, and what we should be doing to make sure.
Yeah, I do think this has been a pivotal change. I think the stories that are coming out are so stark that in some ways, for someone my age, is somewhat disappointing.
Yeah.
Because you would have thought that we've gotten past a lot of this. So that, from that angle, it kind of makes me upset and angry that we're still, as women, having to deal with those types of things. On the other hand, I feel really good about the fact that there's just a very different dialogue going on. Yeah. And we have to make sure that dialogue continues. The other thing we have to make sure is that because of what's happened, that men now don't become afraid to really sponsor and mentor women, well, yeah. Right? So we have to make sure we're working this from both sides and making sure that we continue to build our allies to make sure that we're really having those conversations and pulling women up. But I do think it's been a game changer, and I do think there's just very different discussion going on.
You told a poignant story as we were preparing to come out about reminding your executives that not everybody gets out of their car and walks to work in the same condition. That's a really interesting conversation about empathy. Could you share that story?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you had the opportunity to see what Starbucks did, and there's videos that are out there as part of the training that I thought were just extraordinarily powerful. I would recommend, if you haven't seen them, to definitely look at them. And what struck me about that is, you know, we're working really hard inside the company to have a very diverse and inclusive company, a culture where people feel welcomed. But what I did is I took those videos and I sent them to my leadership team to remind them that people going out their door and before they get to our door at our company are dealing with a lot of different emotions and things. And, you know, we as leaders need to recognize and have real empathy to the fact that this is the headset that people are walking into the company with. and that it's our responsibility to really make sure we're understanding that. Again, we can't change everything in the outside world, but having good, frank conversations about what people are feeling, how they're dealing with these various issues that are out there, I think allow my leadership team to become engaged at a very different level.
Yeah. So before we go to questions, how does a kid from a bustling NYPD family become the CEO?
I know, I am like that show on TV. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm that show.
Yeah.
It is that show. The whole family is that show. It's really, it's funny. My mom passed away 2 years ago, and like that was her favorite show, Blue Bloods. I mean, it was like, I'm like, oh, Mom, you're watching Blue Bloods? Of course. I think she watched all of them and the repeats. But, you know, I don't know, I think one of the things that happened to us as a family is my dad got sick at a fairly young age, and there was a lot of financial strain in the family. And, you know, one of the things that you learn pretty young when you're in a family of all police officers is they don't really make a ton of money.
No, they don't.
And in some ways, I'm amazed my father was able to raise all of us and have food. There were 6 of us plus 2 cousins, so 8 on a policeman's salary. He always had like 3 jobs anyway, but... you know, I just really made a decision that, you know, for us, I was going to embark. I was the first in my family to go to college. As a matter of fact, when I came home and told my parents I was going to college, they told me good luck, because there was no money to help me with college. And, you know, I really pursued this career of just really trying to figure out how can I make a success of myself and really strive to, you know, make that economic shift that maybe my family hasn't been able to do. And I think one of the positives is, you know, I can now help my family in a lot of different ways. So, you know, I try to really make sure to remember where, you know, I didn't grow up far from here, right over the bridge in Queens. And, you know, I don't forget where I come from. I think that's one of the reasons I have a lot of empathy, because, you know, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon, and I worked my way up. And I have a lot of respect for people who do that.
You didn't grow up playing lacrosse on Long Island like
I
everybody else?
did not play lacrosse on Long Island. I didn't even know what lacrosse was, you know.
Same. Do we have questions? I'm not sure how I don't want to leave anybody out.
We do, actually. First question from the audience says, how do you go from admiring someone at work who might be your role model to asking them for help?
So that's a great question. And I would say more times than not, people will want to help you. So I think what I would suggest is actually reaching out to that person and saying, can I get a few minutes with you to talk about my career or whatever it is you're looking for advice on? The one caution is make sure you have a plan of what it is you're going to ask, because it's hard to just create a relationship out of the cold. So if you come in and say, hey, this is what I want to be this in 3 years, here's how I'm thinking, does this make sense to you? Or I've gotten feedback on this, how do you think I can change what I'm doing? Or however, whatever the advice is you're asking, just be very crisp and clear so that the person can really help you. Because sometimes people come and there's like silence, and you're like,
no,
okay.
just help me. Just help me. I know.
Yes.
That's sort of how I do it. But
I would ask. I think that's one thing that probably isn't done enough. People are willing to help people, especially people who've made it and are successful. I mean, they're going to be willing to help you more times than not. I think I was telling you earlier, I have a couple of diverse leaders on my team that I'm constantly, I go around, I meet someone who I really think has potential, and I immediately tag them and give them over to my diverse leaders on my leadership team and say, you know, can you mentor this? Can you watch out for this person? Let's see that we're doing all the right things. And it's a way to get engagement at all levels of the company.
So how can we be better allies to each other? I know we only have a couple of minutes left, right?
Yeah, I think, look, we all have the power in this room to be allies to help women. And I think we were talking earlier, I think generationally, women in the past didn't really help each other. And, you know, there was that one role at the table that they got, and they were going to hold on to that no matter what. I think the opportunity now is there's a lot of power in the pipeline that's coming up. And I think all of us have a responsibility to each other, whether it's someone you work with or someone who works for you, your sister, your niece. You know, we all have the ability to help empower people around us. And I would just say, you know, for you yourself, be your authentic self, and then help others be their authentic self. But don't be afraid to really help and mentor. And I'd also tell you, if you see, If you see some like woman crashing into a wall for whatever, help them. Don't just let them crash.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times just, I don't know, it's, I guess, the way we grew up. We don't always think that way. And I think it's really important that we have a lot of power right now, a lot of power. And we have voice that we didn't have in the past. And I think it really is an opportunity for all of us in the room to really help each other.
So you are doing some very interesting things in the world. You have some causes you care about. I thought we could end with you just telling us what you're working on, and maybe we can figure out a way to get the network to help.
Sure. So one of the things that I'm really focused on 2 areas, but one in particular is around really helping break the cycle of poverty and illiteracy here in the United States. And I'm on the board of something called Build On. They work in 38 of the most challenged high schools in the United States. We support a school right up in Bassick, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and we also support another school in Chicago. And these are kids that are overcoming enormous challenge to stay in school, get their degree, and hopefully go on to college. 92% of the kids go on to college. And I think what's been really powerful for me is just really getting to know the kids and actually sitting in the high school and understanding what they're going through. And the program really works with the students all 4 years, and we do a lot of mentoring through our company, so our employees go and work at the school and work with the students. And it's just so powerful to really be able to look at someone that you mentored and know that you had an impact on their life, and they're off and hopefully going to be very successful. Now, the challenge is, it's 38 high schools, and there's many people who need this kind of support, and it's just a big cause for me that I'm very focused on, and I think we can make a difference in the world by really lifting people up and helping them be successful.
But it has to be transformational for the kids that you are able to work with, but also for your executives and your employees as well, which is an interesting element of building an inclusive workforce, is encouraging people to actually be in the world as it exists.
Well, and I think it's been extraordinarily eye-opening for a lot of our leaders. I don't know how familiar people are with Bridgeport, Connecticut, but it's surrounded by some very nice communities. And I think my best story is at the holiday party, I heard 2 of my kind of senior leaders in the company talking about, 2 men, talking about the experience they had of mentoring this particular student. I overheard them. It wasn't like they were talking to me. And they both talked about how that experience changed their whole way of thinking. Mm. And I had a big smile on my face, because that's exactly what it's about. It's, really engage in getting in there, understanding the issues, and then feeling like I'm going to do this the next time. So we tend to get more volunteers than we even need in this program, but it's just a great way to really engage on what's really happening in our communities.
Yeah. So we've got about a minute left. Final advice for the extraordinary people in this room?
I'm going to give you one piece of advice. Take that little voice that's in your head, write down whatever that voice says, and then throw that piece of paper away. Because I think our biggest challenge is ourselves. We tend to really constantly question whether we're ready. Am I ready for the job? Maybe the job's too big. I don't have all the skills on the thing, whatever. Put it aside. Go for the job. Be clear on what you want. The worst thing that happens is you don't get this job, but you get the next one. And also make sure people know what your aspirations are. Don't just, if it's in your head and nobody knows about it, no one's going to help you. So that little voice, number 1, write it down, throw it out.
Don't you want to work for Synchrony now? Margaret, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for welcoming us. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.